At first light on January 3rd, 2026, the streets of Caracas were still, but the world was not. In a quiet operation that stunned diplomats and intelligence circles, Nicolas Maduro, once the iron-fisted president of Venezuela, was seized by U.S. forces and flown to Newark. The charges he faces could reshape geopolitics for years to come. Rumors of his capture had swirled for over a decade, yet when it finally happened, it was fast, dramatic, and sent a thunderous echo across the globe. But to understand how a former bus driver became one of South America's most controversial leaders, and why his fall reverberates far beyond Venezuela's borders, we have to go back to where it all began. Nicolas Maduro Moros was born into a world where politics was as common as the air he breathed. His father, a union activist, instilled in him an early fascination with organized labor and leftist ideology. These were lessons that would shape an unlikely journey from union halls to the presidential palace. Maduro's first political steps were humble. He was a bus driver, a union organizer, and a young leftist steeped in the Marxist-inspired movements that stirred Venezuela in the 1980s. It was in the Transit Workers Union of Caracas that Maduro first tasted power. Behind the wheel of a bus, negotiating wages and rights, he found his voice. Then, Hugo Chavez, a fiery former army officer, burst onto the national stage in the 1990s with dreams of a Bolivarian revolution. Maduro was one of the first to join the cause. He campaigned for Chavez's release after a failed coup attempt and rose quickly within the movement. By the early 2000s, he was a fixture in Chavez's inner circle. He was elected to the National Assembly and later appointed foreign minister. Maduro's loyalty was unquestioned. Yet even then, his path was anything but assured. He wasn't a charismatic demagogue like Chavez. He emerged from the crowd, not above it. But Chavez saw in him a stubborn loyalty, a trait that soon outweighed charisma and the volatile world of Venezuelan politics. When Chavez's health declined and he died in 2013, Maduro became interim president, inheriting a fractured political legacy. His victory in the following election was razor-thin, less than a 2% margin, and was plagued by controversy and opposition claims of electoral manipulation. It was a fragile start to what would become one of the most turbulent presidencies in Latin American history. What followed was a country unraveling. Under Maduro's rule, Venezuela slipped into a downward spiral of economic collapse and political strife. By 2018, hyperinflation soared into the millions of percent, making the national currency, the bolivar, nearly worthless. Ordinary citizens were forced to carry backpacks of cash just to buy bread. Shortages of basics like milk, medicine, and even toilet paper became the norm. Millions of Venezuelans fled the country in an exodus unseen anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere. Maduro's response to the crisis was unapologetic and unyielding. He tightened his grip on power, sidelining opposition leaders and reshaping Venezuela's political institutions to maintain control. In 2017, a constituent assembly, elected amid widespread clashes and international criticism, effectively neutered the opposition-controlled National Assembly. This move consolidated his authority and signaled a clear shift toward unabashed authoritarianism. Too many inside and outside Venezuela, he became a symbol of state collapse. Sanctions from the United States and other nations piled up, accusations of corruption, electoral fraud, and human rights abuses followed. In 2024, Argentina even issued an arrest warrant for alleged crimes against humanity. International bodies, including the International Criminal Court, opened investigations into abuses under his regime. Yet for all the pressure, Maduro survived. Until he didn't. On that January morning in 2026, U.S. forces reportedly conducted a targeted operation in Caracas that led to the capture of Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. They were quickly transported to the United States to face a sweeping indictment. The charges include narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, and weapons offenses. The indictment portrays Maduro not just as a fallen leader, but as a central figure and an alleged global network of criminal collaboration. This network supposedly involved Colombian guerrillas, Mexican cartels, and Venezuela's own military elite. The legal case against him paints a picture of state power, deeply entwined with narcotics trafficking. It alleges that diplomatic immunity and military protection were used to move cocaine into the U.S. and Europe. Prosecutors claim that for over 2 decades, Maduro's regime facilitated these operations, enriching allies and tightening control through these illicit networks. Maduro has denied all charges. In his first U.S. court appearance in Manhattan, he pleaded not guilty and described himself as a prisoner of war. He insisted he remains Venezuela's rightful president, despite his detention and the international furor surrounding his capture. His wife, Flores, once a powerful political figure in her own right, also appeared in court denying any wrongdoing. Her visible injuries fueled further debate about the nature of the operation that brought them down. The repercussions of this moment are profound. Maduro's capture set off a wave of misinformation and AI-generated images online. Some falsely depicted his capture, others mixed real footage of U.S. military aircraft and explosions with completely invented scenes. This has blurred the lines between fact and fiction in our digital age. In Venezuela, reactions are deeply polarized. Supporters of Maduro decry what they call an illegal abduction and a violation of their national sovereignty. Meanwhile, his critics and many ordinary citizens see it as long overdue accountability for years of suffering. Outside observers are raising complex questions about international law and the precedent set when a sitting or recently sitting head of state is apprehended and tried on foreign soil. But beyond the geopolitics and the legal battles lies the human story. It's the story of a nation scarred by years of hardship, where ordinary families bore the brunt of economic collapse and political repression. Millions of Venezuelans carried the weight of hyperinflation, scarcity, and insecurity long before the headlines of 2026. For better or for worse, Nicolas Maduro's name will be etched into the history of the 21st century. He won't just be remembered as a president, but as a figure whose rise, fall, and dramatic end illuminate the volatile intersections of power, ideology, and human consequence. And as the world watches the trial unfold in New York, one question remains on everyone's mind. What will become of Venezuela now that its most controversial leader is no longer at its helm? Only time will tell. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. See you in the next video.